This is Jessica.
And this is Kelly. And this is the Chasing Brighter
podcast. I'm very excited about how my hair looks.
Great. You know what else makes your hair look great, Jess?
Washing it.
The Warrior Strong Wellness collagen peptides and bone broth. I've noticed a huge difference with just the health of my hair. I just have naturally thin hair. So
collagen's so good for hair, nails, skin. Check out warriorstrongwellness.com for their collagen peptides and bone broth or their multi-collagen protein powder.
If you use the Chasing Brighter code, all one word, Chasing Brighter, you can get 10% off of your purchase.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on Chasing Brighter. Today, we have Angel Uribe joining us, and she is a moderation management coach and owner of Stages of Change Center. Angel, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. So ready to start having the conversation. I have this conversation with people so often, one-to-one. And I find that the more that I speak into it, the more I realize how important it really is to start just conversations in general. People are so skittish about having conversations around chemical health and mental health. And, all of that is changing and evolving, but you still find like on the ground, it's something that's still very new for people. And so creating space for even just the dialogue is so important. And it's occurring to me more and more as I start speaking to more audiences and to more individuals about this. So I'm super excited that I'm here today.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, we feel the same. I mean, I think I have a hard time dealing with my emotions. And a lot of people, I think, just naturally don't want to think about have those tough conversations. And then, I think I've learned especially, I mean, Jess, you're professional at this, but just that the more you have those, it is more rewarding. You kind of have to push through some of those, but it's good stuff. It's doing the work in some ways too. So,
yeah.
So would you mind telling us just kind of a quick summary about what your background is and what you do at the center?
Sure. So my background, I have about 24 years now of collective clinical work experience in chemical and behavioral health. For the past 12 years, I have owned Stages of Change Center, and this is my own kind of exploration into what it means to go upstream a little bit, where providing intervention services is concerned around chemical health. And so Stages of Change Center started just as providing some alcohol and drug education to individuals who had gotten into, some trouble, maybe like a DWI situation or a disorderly conduct or just some sort of first risk indicators that were coming through in the legal system, because originally my career began as a probation and parole officer. That was what was most familiar to me. And so I started out with my licensing. I was able to do chemical health assessments and that alcohol and drug education. And over the years, what I realized is that I was providing moderation management interventions for people, because at the point that they were coming to me, their lives were not unmanageable. For all intents and purposes, as a matter of fact, their lives were pretty functional. It's just that their relationship with alcohol or mood-altering chemicals was starting to deteriorate in terms of, it was becoming more unhealthy. But as we know, is that people can kind of ride that line for a really long time, where that relationship is becoming unhealthy with their substance of choice, but they're not seeing those effects in major life areas. And so there's not a recognition or even, anybody necessarily speaking into them that maybe they need to take a look at that. And so what I eventually started to realize was that going upstream is a much better approach, right, than waiting for someone's life to become unmanageable, which is where I worked early in the system. But then as I really grew into the business and started expanding services, I started to think about what it might look like to do a program around mindful drinking for balanced living, right? Where you even go a little bit further upstream and you start talking to people before any legal issues even start to present. And so that's kind of where I'm at today, is I'm still providing all of those early intervention services for individuals who are coming through with some legal issues. But I also am starting to have conversations and work with individuals who are saying, you know, I think I need to take a look at this, which is just so wonderful to see people reaching out and asking for that support.
Yes. And I definitely want to get into that. I know Kelly and I talk a lot about health and longevity. So we've been talking about alcohol moderation, but I want to go back a little bit. When you are working with people, are you saying, for the most part, if I'm getting this correctly, not in necessarily the mindful drinking for balanced living program, is that someone that you would say does not have dependence issues, but someone that definitely doesn't have a good relationship with alcohol?
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? Is that when you start to see a DWI situation, you start to look at it and say, well, what is going on here? What is the bigger issue around the drinking that's leading to that high risk behavior? But it's not the case that everybody has a clinical diagnosis to be made around their chemical use. And that, as a matter of fact, 90% of heavy drinkers don't meet medical criteria for substance abuse disorder. And so, you know, when we're thinking about that, you say, okay, I see this risk is showing up in your life. There's something else going on here, and we need to explore that a little bit more. But the idea is that we don't want to wait until they're diagnosable, until there's something that's, you know, being lost in their lives. You know, a DWI situation is already, you know, pretty significant in its own right, not only because of the threat of harm to self and others, but you're also talking about surrendering one of the things that we hold as the most dear, which is civil liberties and freedoms, right? So if you're exchanging those things for the way that you're using alcohol, there's something that needs to be looked at there, if that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a dependency issue. It's just that there's a risk behavior that could lead you into more, spaces where there's more collateral damage or more likelihood of more loss or unintended consequence in the future.
I can see that in that. I think many of us drank, and especially in college where, you didn't always make good choices. And, in some ways it seems as though some of us got luckier than others in terms of, getting caught, let's say, on doing something that you shouldn't have been doing. And it's definitely not something anybody needs to do. And I think, it's interesting hearing you kind of describe it that way too, right? It's not necessarily, it's the average person per se, most of the time, who might have made a bad choice. Mm-hmm. And it could have made more worse choices, or it could have been the beginning of going down a different path.
One of the things that I find so often is that a lot of people carry their early relationship behaviors with alcohol into the next stage of their life. When we're younger, we don't have a lot of things that we see that we could lose, right? So when we're out there, we're going to live 100 years. We've got all, everything is going to be fine, and we're just enjoying life. But as we grow into our lives and we start getting married and we start buying homes and, having careers, a lot of times everything else in our life changes, but because there's no real exploration into the relational dynamics that we formed with alcohol, a lot of times we keep drinking the way that we did when we were young and carefree. Because one of the things that I find is how difficult it is to even just sit and dialogue with people about their chemical health, because there is that fear of judgment. Even if you don't think you have a chemical use issue, it's a conversation that's a little bit, off-putting for some people. Even when they get into some trouble, they're still a little bit guarded about having to tackle that conversation, right? And
it's like alcoholic or not alcoholic, like, right?
Exactly.
It's like either you have a major problem or not.
Yeah.
It's like there's no middle ground. And I think about, like, we're talking about early drinking, and it's like I had a conversation with a friend, and it's cute and funny. You're in your 20s, haha, you're drinking, but then all of a sudden, like you're saying, then you have responsibilities, job, whatever, and then it's not cute anymore. But there's no dialogue about it. There's no programming about it. It's just like you're all this sudden supposed to have your shit together and not do that anymore.
Right. And then when things start to happen, we start looking for all the outside reasons first, right? And giving credit where credit is due is just something we're not ready to do yet. We don't want to touch that because a lot of times it's tied itself into our social networks and into our business networks. And, that's the one thing about alcohol is that it's everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because of the fear that is oftentimes attached to, having to explore it. It's like, well, what does that mean? Do I have a problem or don't I? Because those are really the only two options that are often taught or presented, right? And so people would rather just say, oh, it was a one-off, it was a mistake, it was, all of those things. And that's very well possible, but it's worth exploring. But people need a safe place to do that. They need to feel like it's safe enough to have the conversation without feeling like someone's going to come in behind you and say, okay, that means you have to quit. You cannot do that, because the threat to the adjustment is pretty serious for people, even if they're not chemically dependent or, in a struggling with severe substance abuse.
Yeah, I think that I'm only trying to think about myself, right? And my own thoughts about like how, if I never had a drink again, it seems like something that I would have a hard time coming around to. Which is a weird thing because we just came back from vacation in Mexico and we went to an all-inclusive and the whole family and my husband, and we've really cut down in terms of drinking, especially during the week, and just really noticed how better we feel, trying to be more mindful, like you were talking about, in terms of making those choices. And then you're at this beautiful resort, in a tropical location, and it's 11 o'clock and, the pina coladas are flowing. And we were just talking about how, like, why is that? Why is there like a culture, even when you're on vacation, and this whole concept of all you can drink, right? This all inclusive, and like where that came about, and like why, you can eat and drink everything when you're on vacation, sort of a thing. It's kind of messed up in that way.
Yes. And then you come home tired and burnt and it takes you like a week of extra vacation to recover. Right. It is such a cultural thing. And what is so, what I attribute to that sometimes is that the idea of taking a vacation is, I can let go and I can just relax and I can, let go of the stress and the anxieties of everyday life and the worries. And unfortunately, that culturally we've tied the idea of, eating what you want and drinking what you want to being that experience, to making that experience happen for you, right? As though you can't just go in there and be about the space you're in and find that relaxation. One of my posts that I did recently for my TikTok and Instagram was talking about, have you ever gone on vacation? And when you get to where you're going, one of the first things you look around for is the bar. Where can I find, just get this relaxation started. And one of my tips for individuals in that case is, before you do that, it's okay to go and have some drinks while you're on vacation and enjoy yourself. But you're more likely to moderate your use if you take like 30 minutes before you go do any of that to find a quiet space and recenter yourself. Because sometimes I feel like vacation even becomes a frenzied thing of its own, right? And so what we're doing constantly is on overdrive, and that fight or flight response is always going. And what happens is when we are feeling extreme in any way, shape, or form, this is one of those like traps people fall into where they'll end up drinking a little bit more than what they would if they were already calm and relaxed, or, because what you're trying to achieve is that ultimate relaxation. But unfortunately, if you came in hot, because you're on overdrive, that tends to lend to having a little bit more than maybe what you would if you came in and just kind of got recentered and relaxed and approached your vacation from the standpoint of, I want to leave here feeling my best and feeling refreshed. And that can include a few drinks, but we think the drinks are going to be what gets us there, when in reality, we need to get there. And then you can have, some drinks in moderation and start changing the way we perceive what that all-inclusive option is really about.
Explore more. Like, I guess, wow. Why or how is drinking to unwind kind of dangerous for our health and well-being? And I know, like, for me as a mental health therapist, when I talk to my clients about what are we doing for self-care, what are we doing to relax, and they'll say, I have 2 glasses of wine every night to relax. It's not like I'm like, oh, you're an alcoholic, but it's like that why bothers me. Like, and so I would love to explore that more about unwinding, like drinking to unwind being dangerous, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the reason why it can be so dangerous for people is because the more that your drinking is tied to your interpersonal sense of self, like your interpersonal self, the more risky it becomes, because it's almost as though you associate it as, I need this in order to experience that. Right. And so if the goal of doing some coaching or counseling is to help someone to get into a state of more relaxation, or to let go of some things so that they can relax, or to work through some anxieties, that is a wonderful tool for people to help them sort of achieve that inner peace and peace of mind. But if using alcohol is necessary for the client or for the person to experience what they believe is what relaxation is, that sets up a trap in your mind, because over time, you're going to develop tolerance to those 2 glasses. So in order to achieve that relaxation effect, now I've got to do 2.5 glasses or 3 glasses. And next thing you know, oh boy, that bottle is gone. And I didn't realize that, I had consumed that much that, last night or whatever have you. And the more that grows, of course, it starts to create a loop effect, right? If you drink the entire bottle of wine, you're going to wake up tomorrow having borrowed from tomorrow last night. And now the day demands 100% of you, but you're lagging with about 80% because of the alcohol taking it out of you the night before while you were seeking relaxation. And so now, through the day, the world and life is demanding 100% of you, but you can only bring 80%. So when you get to 5 o'clock, you cannot wait for that next glass of wine to bring relaxation, right? Because you've already felt depleted through the day, if that kind of makes sense. And so the danger in that is that it starts out and it works and that's what I tell my clients all the time, as a coping strategy. Alcohol and even drugs work 100% of the time. That's the problem, because they lend us to this idea that it's easy, it's accessible. We can use it for the purpose of getting immediate relief of the distress, discomfort, or dis-ease that we're in. And the more we do that, the more it sort of like becomes its own loop of risk for us, right? And so when you say the why behind it, I would encourage my clients, like, if they describe their relationship with alcohol as being a fringe item, right, that they just use on occasion, then there should be no tie back or need for it to accomplish something that they should be able to accomplish with natural interventions. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And when you say borrowing for tomorrow, I mean, are you talking about the negative impact on sleep?
Yes, 100%. So one of the things that we know is that biologically, your body will not go into REM sleep if it has a mood altering chemical in it. It cannot, because the body is most vulnerable during REM sleep. And so when you have, especially with alcohol, you consume a central nervous system depressant, the second layer of you, which is the autonomous system, is not going to allow the body to go into that deep state of rest, because its job is to keep you alive through the night, right? And so we often don't realize it, but it's kind of like when you go in for surgery, they say they put you to sleep, but what we understand is I'm not actually sleeping, I'm sedated. And that's the same thing with alcohol. And why you wake up the next day and you don't feel refreshed and you feel lethargic and you feel like empty of energy is because you were sedated, but you weren't sleeping. You weren't getting the healing sleep. So the body wakes up the next day feeling depleted.
Right.
Before it even starts.
All those benefits of sleep. Kelly and I, we did a book club on Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. And he, like Kelly read, it was almost like, hey, I have this brand new magic pill that helps you feel better, lose weight, helps your health, increases your lifespan, all this stuff, and it's sleep.
And it's free.
And it's free. And we need to get all of those phases. And I think that's too, like, even sleeping pills and all of those things are just sedating you. And if you can't get yourself to sleep naturally, you're not going to. And that's like a core of our health and well-being is good sleep.
Mm-hmm. I think what I'm surprised at is the number of people who clearly aren't listening to our podcast because they would know all that. But I am now at a point where I thought it was sort of common knowledge in some way that alcohol impacts sleep. And I had lunch recently with a colleague who I hadn't seen in years. And we were talking about sleep. And he was saying how he just doesn't sleep well. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm obsessed with sleep. I have a Fitbit. I track my sleep. And I know the times where I sleep like crap. And I know usually it's tied to alcohol. I was like, so I really cut down on my alcohol consumption. And he was like, oh man, he was like, I didn't know that. He was like, I have, a beer a night. And I was like, you have a beer every single night? He was like, maybe two beers every single night. And he's like, he's very healthy and very active. And I was like, wow, like there's now, I feel like there's like conflicting information, but in a lot of ways, it was always like 1 or 2 drinks a night is okay to have. And so it's like, everyone thinks it's okay to have that much alcohol, and they don't say all the things that it impacts later on.
That's absolutely one of the things is like, it's half truths and misinformation that I think are creating the most risk for people, whether we're just talking about general health and wellness, or, you're narrowing in on their chemical health in particular, right? It's one of those things that most of us will begin a relationship with and have longer than we will be with our love of our lives, right? But it's something that I find that people go through and don't really understand the implications of that dynamic and that relationship that they have to alcohol. So when we're young, of course, we can go out and maybe tie, a little bit extra to the wagon that night, and we'll bounce up the next day and we'll just like rock it out, because our systems are as efficient as they're ever going to be. Mm-hmm. And it can withstand things like not getting all the sleep that we need. Is it good for us? No, of course not at any age, but we get into this belief structure that it's okay because we were able to do it. We were able to handle it. And then as we get a little bit older and our bodies and our minds start working differently and the demands of life start changing and shifting, we don't really take the time to explore, well, what is the implication of having alcohol on a weeknight when I've got to get up and perform tomorrow as a mom or as a business owner or, as a professional. And it's so insidious, because the last thing you think it is that you need to look at is the alcohol, because we've decided that it helps us, right, to manage the stress indicators that come in from all the things that we're doing as mothers and professionals and working women and as family members and all that stuff. And so this is one of the reasons why I think the conversation is so important, because even most people I find, if you just can talk to them and help them, like speaking to your friend and saying, hey, listen, I've been tracking this and this is what I found, puts a seed into their minds to go, I wonder what would happen if I just left the alcohol alone on Monday through Thursday, and just see if because honestly, even if you can get back 4 nights of REM sleep in a week, you're improving. And to me, it's always an approach of progress over perfection when it comes to our health and wellness, right? One of the concerns people have for me is, well, so what you're saying is I can't drink at all because it's not good for me. And so basically I have to give up my fun and my social life and the way that I do things. And I think that is a flawed approach to it as well. Mm-hmm. The reality is that with information, just like people can change their nutrition and, their sleep habits and, their water intake and stuff with education, information, and conversation, they can start to explore what it might look like to balance out their relationship with alcohol so that they can experience more of the good things, right? More restfulness, more energy, more confidence, because a lot of people will sit and silently debate about whether or not their alcohol use is okay or not okay, and just bring an alcohol moderation coach into the room, and everybody's gonna be questioning themselves, I find, because they're like, so what do you think? Do you think I'm okay?
Right. When I hear like what you're saying too is kind of tapping into yourself. And I know Kelly and I were talking about that. I think if I have, and it has to be like particular, I'm starting to kind of investigate what alcohol I feel better with, if that makes sense, right? Oh, maybe it's red wine, or maybe it's a vodka soda. And then I feel, but it's like, to me, it's like after 2 drinks, I don't feel good. It's very weird. Like I think I get inflamed and my nose gets stuffy. And so I'm like, oh, I don't really feel great after 2 drinks, right? That's kind of just tapping into myself and thinking about that. But also if I go for the 3rd drink, then I start making poor decisions, right? Where you're like, oh, YOLO, forget it. Like, let's go get pizza. Let's go. You know what I mean? Like, I just think I just start making poor decisions all around.
That is absolutely a phenomenon experienced by many. It's so interesting that you say that, because our bodies do try to tell us, hey, this is, at the end of the day, it's a poison to our body, right? And so we understand, we take risks every day with, food choices and air and different things that we're doing. But the thing is, the body wants to communicate with you what it can tolerate, right? And I always tell people is, even if you push your limits and your body can tolerate more, you should never consider that non-consequential use, right? The stuffy nose is an indication that it's activated basically your histamines in your body, right? So that's why some people will get that stuffy nose effect after consuming certain beverages of alcohol. But I like what you said, Jessica, about exploring which ones you can enjoy in moderation that don't seem to have as much of a negative impact on your body, right? Because that is about that self-discovery effect. Alcohol is not the problem, right? It's why we're using it and how we're using it that determines the degree of problems it's going to or is likely to cause for us. And so if you are on that journey and you're willing to explore, this for me works, I can have 2 drinks, I can enjoy myself, I can enjoy a conversation, I can recall all of the events, I can go to bed that night and I can feel like I got adequate enough sleep. I enjoyed the evening before and the day after. That's kind of what I tell my clients is a really important measure of how you're doing, right? If you decide that drinking in moderation is possible for you and you can stay consistent in that and kind of find that sweet spot, that's the ideal goal, right? It's not about either or you can either have nothing and be healthy, or you have what you have and you suffer all the consequences of it. That's the good part about being able to explore it without the judgment, right? So I tell people a lot, I say, get curious with yourself. How much allows me to still show up and honor the things in my life that I say matter? Because I think that is so key to setting the limit. Because what you're talking about is, what is my limit, right? And sometimes what people decide their limit is, well, when does the alcohol run out? Or when do I fall to sleep? Or what does that look like? And the idea of looking into your own personal life and saying, what I have found is this type of drink in this amount allows me to enjoy myself in moderation, but not go so far that I start compromising the things in my life that I say matter, like making healthy food choices or getting a good amount of sleep, or, just maintaining my relationships and that kind of thing.
I like that. I almost wonder even like what, I noticed more and more restaurants, right, are offering a lot of alcohol-free cocktails. And part of even going out is just that fun of having a fancy drink. So I even wonder about like even challenging myself if I went out with friends or even my husband, if I just didn't drink alcohol for dinner and just had those other drinks. Cause is it, I've been trying to think like, I'm not drinking that much. So it's like, I don't have this drive to like feel buzzed, let's say, right? Kind of a thing. It's just like having a drink in my hand. So what if I did not have anything with alcohol, and how would that make me feel? Because I think my personality is probably going to be solid either way. Right, Jess?
Yep, absolutely.
Of course. One of my favorite drinks when I go to the bar that doesn't have alcohol in it is like this really great concoction of like orange juice and cranberry juice and a little 7-Up and a little splash of lime. And it looks amazing. And I love the taste of it because it is so refreshing. And so I have done that over the years where I will, I'll go in and order it. Nobody knows that there's no alcohol in it. Mm-hmm. It's just that I will go up and I'll just order it because at that point, I want to make sure that, again, I'm enjoying the entire evening. I can recall, I can still show up and be the parent that my kids deserve me to be tomorrow. And it just feels better, right? It takes a minute to adjust yourself in those environments. But honestly, most of the struggle we have around our social environments is internal. And so if we will just sort of explore what it means to rethink about, power. Because you said, you're not even out there chasing like this feeling or this buzz anymore. It's just, well, this is where I'm at. I'm in this social situation, and the psychology of our brains will bring back to us like, oh, well, I should have a drink in this moment, or, whatever have you. You are so right that even just having a opportunity to have something fruity or a little bit more, pleasing to the palate can be really all that you need, because most people would tell you that alcohol isn't even that's something they enjoy the taste of when they really think about it, right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, for my 40th, my husband and I drove to Louisville, and we were going to hit the Bourbon Trail. And I was so excited. And I don't drink bourbon that much, but like we went to Buffalo Trace, and then you get the tasting room. And I was like, I think even the night before we did like a whiskey flight, and I was like, this is tough, man. And then we go to Buffalo Trace, and I think like after day 2, I was like, this is terrible. Like I can't drink this. It's not enjoyable to me. You're sipping something that is so strong. And I don't mean to, some people like it or whatever, but I just realized like, I don't like this. Here I made this big deal about going to the Bourbon Trail. And I'm like, this isn't even something that I found it to be really not enjoyable at all.
Yes. Oh, it's so true, because what we're looking for is an experience, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about the Bourbon Trail, you're like, oh, that sounds amazing. And well, what do you do if you're on the Bourbon Trail? This is what we're doing, right? But it does kind of come into that moment of realization. Is like most of the time we drink for the effect, not for the taste on our palate, right? We grow accustomed. I have never met a person who told me the first time they drank beer, they loved it, right? Most people will tell you, I didn't like the taste of alcohol. I didn't, and they'll have this whole story assigned to it. But they also have the why I went back and did it again story is because of how they felt with it and the way that it brought about that feeling of relaxation or that buzz feeling. And so they will grow accustomed to or acquire a taste for it. But when you really start dialing back and saying, I want to enjoy things that are pleasing to my palate, a lot of times in those social situations, if that's your goal, alcohol doesn't really fit necessarily into the whole evening, or it doesn't need to, right? And if we're honest, you really don't taste it after 3 drinks anyway.
Yeah.
If you think about what are you tasting, you only really taste the first couple. Because just like everything else, your taste buds numb out after the 3rd drink as well. And so just sort of the idea of exploring what it looks like to think differently about the relationship of the when, the why, the how we are involving ourselves with alcohol can bring about profound shifts that are really very healthy for us, right? And they allow us to let that relationship evolve with us as we grow and as we move into later stages of our life.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's so good. I know we could talk forever because this is so fascinating.
Yes. Well, I thank you guys so much for giving me an opportunity to be here today. It's been just amazing. So thank you so much.
If you'd like to learn more about Angel or her programs, you can check her out on Facebook at Angel Uribe, that's Uribe, Alcohol Moderation Coach, or on Instagram at Mindful Moderation with Angel.
Thanks for listening and joining us today.
And don't forget to follow us on social media at Chasing Brighter or on our blog, chasingbrighter.com.